This guy has a big following. It's cheap, it works well, it's no nonsense, and you can often find a 5-fan fun pack at an even greater bargain to outfit your entire build. And that's why I think the fan being released today has huge potential. Not only is it really not necessarily more expensive, wait till you see how it works too. Welcome to Machines More. We're talking about the Arctic P12, of course, and today the P12 Max is the upgraded version of the fan that's being released. Now, the existing P12, it's a good all-rounder. It has a good airflow to noise profile, so while the price point makes for an ideal case fan, it really is not out of place on radiators or heat sinks. In fact, Arctic sells their liquid freezer line of AIOs with these P12 fans. Now, like everything else in the world, it seems as of late, the P12s used to be a lot cheaper. And just checking on Newegg, the single P12, it's more than $10 a piece, kind of odd. But the 5-pack is $35, which is a lot more palatable. Not an expensive fan either way, but figure it's $7 to $10 today. Depending on what format you buy it in. Now this new fan, it's dubbed the P12 Max. And the Max moniker applied here, it actually makes sense for this fan since the RPM range, at least the high-end limit, is quite max. It's spec'd to go up to 3,300 RPM, plus or minus some manufacturer variants, usually about 5 to 10%. And my test units, they got up to 3,100 RPM at most, which is still going to be way more than enough spin for most users. This new fan has an MSRP of $12.99, but at launch for a limited time, the price is pretty crazy at $8.99. So it's cheaper than that single P12, the regular P12. And I really love that Arctic is keeping with that value theme. Now, you might wonder, why would I spend all this effort reviewing a fan which isn't super expensive to begin with? If it doesn't work out, either way you're only out of pocket a little bit. The way I see it, it's a lot more trouble for you to buy, install, use it, and then find out that, this fan totally sucks, right? And then you have to debug, uninstall, and find a replacement product. So, the dollar cost is one thing. Whether it's a $5 fan or a $35 fan, I try to provide the pertinent information so that you can get the right product the first time. So if you do find hot content like this helpful, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button because it really helps the channel. So big thanks to Arctic today for providing the test units. As with all reviews on the channel, I'm not paid for them. You can expect a thoroughly researched independent review. So like I mentioned, at launch, $8.99, $12.99 in the long term for this Max. It's really not too much more than the P12, that $12.99 price. And I can tell you, if you're looking for a fan in this price range, go ahead and skip the P12 and get this one. Because there's not really much reason to other than the price, but even at launch, there's not much of a difference. In fact, this one's cheaper. I think the difference is well worth it though, even at $13. So let's see what's changed. First off, the frame is updated to match Arctic's recent offerings. It's similar to the ones on their mini-itx, the P12 RGB. It's not a big difference between the new one and the old one, but the addition of the rubber dampeners here, it's going to help with any vibration on your rad or your case. You've also still got the same wide blade design, but the blades are now connected with a ring, right? So a few performance fans use this design nowadays, such as the Cooler Master Mobius fans, and this does help with balance and reducing vibration and also gives the fan more strength. The individual blades on the P12, they flex quite a bit, and on the Max, that reinforcement, it really helps stiffen up the entire ensemble, which if you're gonna have this one spinning at 3,000 plus RPM, it's nice to have. This center hub is also bigger, and along with the increased RPM, this fan is now rated at 0.29 amps instead of somewhere around 0.2 amp for the original, depending on which version you get. Now do note that if you have multiples hooked up to one single header, 0.29 amps, you're probably going to want to stay on the safe side, 3 at most, so you don't want to blow that header by accident. The biggest change I'm going to talk about here is the performance though, and that's why I would recommend the Max version wholeheartedly over the P12. I tested these along with the Noctua NFA 12 by 25s, the Silent Wings Pro 4. Both of these are more than $30 US fans, and also retested the good old P12s. Now, I'm also going to throw the data in from the Montex that I recently reviewed as well, since it's a recently tested budget fan. So for noise normalized testing at a lower noise level here, we are at 1 decibel above the noise floor for the whole system. This is your moderate RPM range. P12 Max is practically tied with Silent Wings 4 Pro and the old P12. This RPM range is the strongest one for the Noctua A12 by 25, so they are quite a bit ahead here. And if you are deploying on a liquid cooling system where 1200 RPM will be as fast as it ever needs to go, you know, your multiple rad system, or you're running just a lighter CPU such as a Ryzen 5600 or non-K i5 type of system, it's hard not to recommend the Noctuas for a silent high-end build because they perform so well and are so quiet for that level of performance. So they're not flat out better than the P12 here, but one thing I'll mention now is that 1100 RPM is problematic for many of the P12s that I've used due to its motor whine or growl issue. And the P12 Max, it does not have that issue. So even if the performance is close here at this RPM range, I would still choose the Max any day because you're not going to see that issue. When we get into the moderate high RPM range, that's when the P12 Max, it really starts to show its colors. At 1500 RPM, it's behind the NFA 12 by 25, but depending on your use case, maybe this is a rounding variance right here, right? Either way, that does make this the second best 25mm fan I've tested at this interval because it pulls ahead of the Silent Wings 4 Pro. Very impressive, considering that you can get pretty much, you know, today you can get 3 of these for the price of one Silent Wings 4 Pro. At a high RPM, the order remains the same, a little bit farther behind the NFA 12 by 25, but nonetheless second to the Noctua and ahead, but still very close to the Be Quiet. The P12 does not get to this level of noise at all, so it's not on the chart here. Finally, I don't recommend it, but you can if you want to. If we max out the RPMs of the top 3 performers here, we can get an idea of performance in the worst case noise scenario. The Arctic, it's top of the charts here. It also spins the fastest. Note that it doesn't improve much though, because you're well past diminishing returns at this point for this test CPU, which is a 5800X, but you know, if you have a hotter CPU, you're going to see more of a boost here. But it's still a data point worth considering. The Noctua does not go beyond 2000 RPM, but what you will notice that even though the P12 Max beats it by a degree when it's at its maximum RPM, the nearly 12 dBA gap means that the perceived loudness is more than twice that of the Noctua at its maximum possible noise level already. So I don't see where users should be choosing this noise level for regular usage. And I mentioned the noise profile. It's one reason to choose this Max over the old P12. So let's just take a quick listen to the noise samples here. Pretty good, right? I think the lack of growl or whine is reason enough to choose the new Max fans over the P12. And for the most part, the noise profile is quite free from irregular noises, at least when I tested it. And when it did go down to the lower RPMs, when it was slowing down, you could hear a little bit of squeaking, but that's not something you're going to encounter on a regular basis. But otherwise, yeah, they're quite good. On the topic of noise, because these have such a high max fan speed and because they go down to 0 at less than 5% PWM, you're going to want to adjust your fan curves, because otherwise most users, you're going to find the speeds are too high based on stock motherboard curves. And so as an example, 30% PWM corresponds to 1300 RPM here, and 40% is 1660 RPM. So if you don't want your system running that high at kind of an idle CPU temperature, then you're going to want to reconfigure it. Some manufacturers, they do include a switch to toggle it to a more usual RPM range, so that users won't have to reconfigure fan curves. At least that's one of the intents. But you know, even though these don't have any switch on the back, I think you're already getting a lot for the price. So that's not a negative per se, it's just something to be aware of, since it's a nuance of high max operating RPM. In fact, when I think about it, there's very few negatives about this fan. The cables are fairly generous, 40 centimeters. It's a simple cable, and some might hope for the daisy chainable PST cable that Arctic uses on a lot of their fans, but at the same time, just realize that neither the Nocturne or the Be Quiet fan that we compare to have those at all. One thing is that if you are intending to replace a system full of P12s and you already have them all daisy chained together, you're going to need splitters. So that's one thing. So $32 fan or right around 10 bucks. You decide, right? Because there are reasons for either one. But in terms of performance, this guy is right up there with the best of them. And even though in the box, it's just the fan and a set of black fan screws, this fan represents tremendous value. The $8.99 limited time launch price is a run, don't walk type of value proposition. And today the Value King Reborn solidifies its position. And I'm super impressed here. Great job, Arctic, and thank you again for continuing to work on innovating even at the value end of the spectrum. So I hope you found this helpful. If so, please give a like, subscribe if you haven't already. I will leave the links for the launched fan down below. Big thanks for watching.